What happens when a prince walks onto live television thinking he owns the place, only to discover that respect isn't something you're born with? In just 36 seconds, one comment would turn a simple morning interview into the most shocking celebrity meltdown ever caught on camera. But before we dive into this absolute train wreck, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now, because we're pulling back the curtain on royalty's dark side, exposing entitled celebrities and their shocking behavior the cameras never showed you. We've got the raw footage they don't want you to see, and you won't want to miss a single reveal. And drop a comment below with your thoughts on this outrageous behavior, because this one is going to leave you speechless. Now, let me set the scene for you. It's a regular morning at the Good Morning America studios in New York. The lights are bright, the cameras are rolling, and millions of Americans are sipping their coffee, expecting a typical celebrity interview. George Stephanopoulos, the seasoned journalist who has interviewed presidents, world leaders, and countless celebrities, sits across from Prince Harry. George is calm, professional, prepared. He's done this 1,000 times. This should be easy, just another day at the office. But from the very first moment, something feels different. There's a tension in the air that the cameras pick up immediately. Prince Harry walks onto the set with this look on his face, this expression that screams, "I don't want to be here." He's not smiling. He's not friendly. He sits down heavily in the chair across from George, barely making eye contact. George, being the professional he is, smiles warmly and extends his hand for a handshake. Harry looks at it for a second too long before finally shaking it. The handshake is weak, dismissive. Already, the audience at home can feel something is off. George starts with what seems like the easiest question in the world. "Thank you so much for joining us this morning. How are you feeling today?" Simple, right? A softball question. Any celebrity would respond with something polite, something generic, but Harry just stares at him. The silence stretches out for what feels like forever. Finally, Harry responds, "I'm here, aren't I?" The tone is sharp, cold. George's smile falters for just a fraction of a second, but he recovers quickly. He's dealt with difficult interviews before. "Of course," George says, trying to lighten the mood. "We're really excited to have you here. I know our audience has a lot of questions they'd love to hear you answer." Harry leans back in his chair, crossing his arms. "Do they? Or is this just another excuse to dig into my personal life?" George blinks. "This is live television. Millions of people are watching." George maintains his composure and says calmly, "Well, I think people are genuinely interested in hearing your perspective. You've been very open about your experiences, and I think that's something people respect." "Respect," Harry repeats, letting the word hang in the air like it's something poisonous. That's interesting coming from someone who makes a living invading people's privacy. You can see George's jaw tighten just slightly. He's a professional, but even professionals have limits. "I appreciate your perspective," George says carefully, "but I think there's a difference between journalism and invasion of privacy. We're here to have a conversation, not to attack you." Harry laughs, but it's not a friendly laugh. It's bitter, mocking. "A conversation? Is that what you call it when you ambush people with questions designed to make them look bad?" George takes a breath. You can see him choosing his words very carefully. "I can assure you, there's no ambush here. I have some questions prepared, yes, but they're fair questions. Questions that I think many people are curious about." "Fair," Harry says, shaking his head. "Nothing about this is fair. Nothing about any of this has ever been fair." George tries a different approach. He's skilled at redirecting conversations, at finding common ground. "I understand you've been through a lot," he says gently, "and I think that's something a lot of people can relate to. Can we talk about some of the positive work you've been doing? The charitable organizations you're involved with?" For a moment it seems like Harry might soften, but then his expression hardens again. "You mean the work that nobody ever wants to talk about? The work that gets ignored because it doesn't generate clickbait headlines?" "Actually," George says, "I think people do want to hear about it. That's why I'm asking." Harry leans forward now, his voice rising slightly. "No, what you want is for me to say something controversial, so you can blast it across every news channel for the next week. That's how this works, isn't it?" The studio audience is completely silent. You could hear a pin drop. George remains calm, but you can see the frustration building behind his eyes. "I think you're being unfair," George says, his voice still measured but firmer now. "I'm trying to give you a platform to share your story." "My story?" Harry's voice is getting louder. "You don't care about my story. You care about ratings. You care about making yourself look good by taking me down." George shakes his head slowly. "That's not true, and I think you know that. I've been doing this job for decades. I've interviewed people from all walks of life, and I've always tried to be fair and respectful. I'm extending that same courtesy to you." Courtesy? Harry stands up now, and the camera zooms out to capture the full scene. "You want to talk about courtesy? Let's talk about how your network has spent years tearing apart my family. Let's talk about the lies, the manipulation, the constant intrusion into our lives." George stands up too, trying to de-escalate. "I understand you're upset, but I'm not responsible for everything that's ever been reported. I'm just here, right now, trying to have an honest conversation with you." Harry points a finger at George, and his voice is shaking with anger now. "Honest? You wouldn't know honest if it hit you in the face. This entire industry is built on lies and exploitation, and you're one of the biggest perpetrators. The control room must be going absolutely insane at this point. This is live television. There's no way to cut away, no way to stop what's happening." George's face is flushed now, but he's still trying to maintain control. "I think we need to take a step back here," he says. "This isn't productive." "Productive?" Harry laughs again, that same bitter, angry laugh. "You want productive? Here's productive. Stop pretending you're some kind of noble journalist when all you do is destroy people's lives for entertainment." George's voice is harder now, the professional mask starting to crack. "I have never set out to destroy anyone's life. I ask tough questions, yes, because that's my job. But I do it with integrity." "Integrity?" Harry spits the word out. "That's rich. You sit here in your fancy studio, making millions of dollars, asking invasive questions, and you call it integrity. You're no better than the tabloids you claim to be above." "That's enough," George says, and for the first time there's real steel in his voice. "You came on this show voluntarily. Nobody forced you to be here. If you're not willing to have a respectful conversation, then perhaps this interview should end." Harry's face turns red. "Oh, so now you're threatening me? Now you're going to kick me off because I'm not playing along with your little game?" "I'm not threatening you," George says, his voice steady despite the chaos. "I'm simply saying that mutual respect is required for this to work. And right now, you're not showing any respect. Not to me, not to this show, and not to the people watching." Harry takes a step closer to George, and you can see security starting to move in the background. "You want to talk about respect? How about you show some respect to me? I'm a prince. Do you understand that? I'm royalty. You should be grateful. I even agreed to sit here with you." And there it is, the moment that makes everything crystal clear. The entitlement laid bare for everyone to see. George's expression changes. The frustration gives way to something else: disappointment. "Being born into a certain family doesn't make you better than anyone else," George says quietly. "Respect is earned, not inherited." Harry's mouth drops open. For a second, he seems genuinely shocked that someone would dare say that to him. Then the anger comes rushing back, twice as strong. "How dare you? How dare you speak to me like that? Do you know who I am?" "I know exactly who you are," George says, and his voice is calm again, but there's power in it. Real power. The kind that comes from integrity and experience. "You're a guest on my show who has spent the last several minutes insulting me and my profession. Title or no title, that's unacceptable." Harry's hands are shaking now. "You're going to regret this. Do you understand me? You're going to regret speaking to me this way. I will make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are." George doesn't flinch. "I'm comfortable with who I am and how I've conducted myself today. Can you say the same?" That question hangs in the air like a bomb. Harry's face goes through a whole range of emotions: anger, shock, indignation, and maybe, just for a second, something that looks like shame. But it's quickly buried under more rage. "This is outrageous. This is absolutely outrageous. I came here in good faith, and this is how you treat me? Good faith?" George raises his eyebrows. "From the moment you sat down, you've been hostile and accusatory. I've tried multiple times to steer this conversation in a positive direction, and you've rejected every attempt. So please, don't talk to me about good faith." Harry turns to someone off camera, presumably his publicist or manager. "We're leaving, right now. This interview is over." He turns back to George, his finger pointing again. "You're a disgrace to journalism. An absolute disgrace." George remains standing, calm and collected. "I'm sorry you feel that way. I wish this could have gone differently." "Save it," Harry snaps. He rips off his microphone, the sound of it coming unplugged, echoing through the studio. "You'll be hearing from my lawyers. All of you will. "You're certainly welcome to do whatever you feel is necessary," George says. "But the cameras have been rolling this entire time. Everyone watching saw exactly what happened here." Harry freezes for a moment, and you can see the realization dawn on his face. This is live television. Millions of people just witnessed everything. Every insult, every entitled comment, every moment of disrespect. There's no spinning this. No PR team can fix this. It's all out there, recorded forever. His face goes pale, then red again. "Turn the cameras off," he demands, looking around at the camera operators. "Turn them off right now." But of course, nobody moves. They're live. They can't just turn the cameras off. George speaks up, his voice still calm. "We're broadcasting live. The cameras stay on until we go to commercial." Harry looks like he's about to explode. "This is a setup. This whole thing was a setup to make me look bad." George shakes his head slowly. "Nobody set you up. You did this entirely on your own. All I did was ask questions." Security is closer now, not threatening, but clearly ready to step in if needed. Harry sees them, and his anger seems to shift into something else. Maybe embarrassment, maybe fear about how this looks. He starts backing toward the exit. "This isn't over," he says, his voice shaking. "This is far from over." "I hope you find some peace," George says. And it actually sounds sincere. Not mocking, not sarcastic. Just genuinely hoping this angry, troubled person can find some peace. Harry doesn't respond to that. He just turns and storms off the set, nearly knocking over a camera as he goes. The camera follows him as he disappears through the studio doors, his security team rushing after him. You can hear muffled shouting from backstage. George stands there for a moment, taking a deep breath. Then he looks directly at the camera, directly at the millions of people watching at home. "Well," he says, and there's the tiniest hint of a sad smile on his face. "That didn't go as planned. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we'll continue with the rest of our show." The professional in him takes over completely. His voice is steady, warm, reassuring. "I want to apologize to everyone watching for what just transpired. That's not the kind of conversation we aim to have here. We always strive for respectful, meaningful dialogue, even when discussing difficult topics." He pauses, and you can see him collecting himself. Sometimes, despite our best efforts, things don't go the way we hope. But that's live television. That's real life. He sits back down, adjusting his jacket, his notes, composed, dignified, everything that Harry wasn't. "We'll be right back." The studio audience, who have been silent this entire time, suddenly erupt. Some are gasping, some are talking excitedly to each other. The energy in the room is electric. Everyone knows they just witnessed something unprecedented, something that's going to be talked about for years. But George just sits there, calm and professional, waiting for the commercial break. Even after everything that just happened, he's not gloating, he's not celebrating, he's not trash-talking, he's just doing his job, being the consummate professional he's always been. And that's what makes the contrast so stark. On one side, you have a man who thinks his birth gives him the right to treat people however he wants. A man who demands respect but shows none. A man who lashes out when he doesn't get his way, who makes threats, who tries to intimidate. On the other side, you have a man who earned his position through decades of hard work. A man who maintained his composure under attack. A man who tried, repeatedly, to salvage the situation and create a meaningful conversation. A man who, even at the end, wished his attacker peace. The commercial break finally comes, and the cameras cut away. But in living rooms across America, people are losing their minds. Social media is exploding. Phone lines are ringing off the hook. Everyone is talking about what they just saw. The entitlement, the anger, the complete meltdown of someone who thought he was above accountability. When the show comes back from commercial, George continues as if nothing happened. He interviews the next guest with the same warmth and professionalism he always has. He doesn't dwell on what happened. He doesn't make it about him. He just moves forward, doing his job, showing everyone watching what real class looks like. The whole incident, from the moment Harry sat down to the moment he stormed off, lasted less than 15 minutes. 15 minutes that revealed everything anyone needed to know about both men. 15 minutes that showed the world what happens when entitlement meets integrity. 15 minutes that proved title means nothing if you don't have character to back it up. George asked fair questions. He tried to be respectful. He gave Harry every opportunity to have a meaningful conversation. And Harry threw it all away because he couldn't handle being treated like everyone else. Because somewhere along the way, He started believing that being born into royalty made him special, made him better, made him untouchable. But here's the thing about live television. It doesn't care about your title. It doesn't care about your status. It shows exactly who you are, without filter, without editing, without spin. And what it showed that morning was a man who had lost touch with reality. A man who genuinely believed that his birth gave him the right to insult, demean, and threaten others without consequence. The irony is that Harry came on the show presumably to control his narrative, to tell his side of the story, to show people who he really is. And he did exactly that, just not in the way he intended. He showed everyone his true colors, the entitlement, the lack of self-awareness, the inability to handle even the gentlest pushback without exploding into rage. George, on the other hand, showed why he's one of the most respected journalists in America. He didn't take the bait when Harry tried to provoke him. He didn't stoop to Harry's level. He maintained his dignity even when Harry was losing his. He stood his ground without being aggressive. He was firm without being disrespectful. He did everything right. And that's what made Harry's behavior look even worse by comparison, because George gave him no excuse, no justification. Harry couldn't claim he was ambushed or attacked or treated unfairly. The whole thing was on camera. Everyone could see that George was nothing but professional, while Harry was completely out of control. Think about the moment when Harry said, "I'm a prince. Do you understand that? I'm royalty." Those words will follow him forever, because they revealed something that no amount of PR can fix. They revealed that deep down, he really believes he's better than other people, that his title makes him special, that the rules that apply to everyone else don't apply to him. And America, a country that was literally founded on rejecting monarchy, saw that and recoiled. Because Americans don't care about titles, they care about character. And Harry showed he has plenty of the former but severely lacks the latter. The moment George said, "Respect is earned, not inherited," was the knockout punch. Not because it was mean or insulting, but because it was true, and Harry knew it was true. That's why he exploded. That's why he completely lost control, because somewhere deep inside, he knows that without his title, without his family name, he's just another person. And being just another person means being accountable for your behavior. It means treating others with respect. It means earning your place in the world instead of demanding it. Harry's threat about lawyers was particularly telling, because that's what entitled people do when they don't get their way. They threaten, they try to intimidate, they use their power and resources to bully people into submission. But George didn't flinch. He calmly pointed out that everything was on camera, that millions of people saw exactly what happened, that there was no spinning this. And you could see Harry realized that his usual tactics weren't going to work, that for once in his privileged life, he was going to be held accountable for his actions. The way George handled the aftermath was equally impressive. He didn't gloat, he didn't mock, he didn't spend the rest of the show talking about what happened. He just apologized to the viewers for the disruption and moved on. That's grace, that's class, that's what real professionalism looks like. He let his actions speak for themselves. He didn't need to explain or justify or defend. Everyone watching knew exactly what they saw. And what they saw was a masterclass in how to handle a difficult situation. George tried everything to salvage the interview. He started with easy questions. He tried to redirect to positive topics. He remained calm when Harry was hostile. He gave Harry multiple chances to reset and start over. He was patient, understanding, professional, and only when it became absolutely clear that Harry had no intention of having a respectful conversation did George finally stand his ground and say enough. That's important, because George didn't shut down the interview at the first sign of trouble. He didn't overreact. He gave Harry every possible opportunity to course correct. He was more than fair. Some might even say he was too patient, that he should have ended things sooner, but he wanted to give Harry every chance. Because that's what good journalists do. They give people room to express themselves, even when it's uncomfortable. But there's a line, and Harry crossed it, multiple times. He insulted George's integrity. He insulted his profession. He made threats. He tried to intimidate. He acted like a spoiled child who wasn't getting his way. And finally, George had to say enough is enough. Not because his ego was bruised, but because allowing that kind of behavior to continue would have been disrespectful to everyone watching, to his colleagues, to his profession, to himself. The contrast between the two men couldn't be more stark. One earned his position through decades of hard work, skill, and dedication. The other was born into privilege and seems to think that's all he needs. One remained calm and professional, even under attack. The other exploded at the slightest challenge. One tried to build bridges and create dialogue. The other burned every bridge he could find. One showed grace and dignity. The other showed entitlement and rage. This wasn't a case of a tough interviewer going after a vulnerable guest. This wasn't a gotcha moment or an ambush. This was simply a professional trying to do his job and a guest who made that impossible. George asked reasonable questions. Harry responded with hostility. George tried to de-escalate. Harry escalated. George remained respectful. Harry became insulting. At every turn, George took the high road and Harry took the low road. And America watched. And America saw. And America made its judgment. Because love him or hate him, George Stephanopoulos is a known quantity. People know who he is. They know his track record. They know he's interviewed everyone from presidents to celebrities to everyday people. And they know he does it with professionalism and integrity. So when Harry came on and tried to paint George as some kind of villain, it didn't work. Because people know better. They've seen George's work for decades. They trust him. Harry, on the other hand, has spent years complaining about how he's been treated by the media, about how unfair everything is, about how he's been victimized. And a lot of people had sympathy for him. They really did. But then they watched this interview, and they saw him get treated with nothing but respect and professionalism, and they saw him respond with anger, insults, and entitlement. And they realized that maybe, just maybe, the problem isn't everyone else. Maybe the problem is him, because if you can't handle a straightforward interview with a respected journalist without exploding into rage, what does that say about you? If you think asking normal questions is an attack, what does that say about your relationship with accountability? If your response to being challenged is to throw your title around and make threats, what does that say about your character? The viewers at home saw all of this play out in real time. They saw George try to be kind, patient, and understanding. They saw Harry reject every olive branch. They saw the entitlement on full display. They saw someone who truly believes the rules don't apply to him. And they didn't like what they saw. Not one bit. This is what happens when privilege meets accountability. When someone who has been shielded their entire life suddenly faces the same expectations as everyone else. When someone who is used to deference and special treatment encounters someone who treats them like a regular person, and they can't handle it. They simply cannot handle being treated like everyone else. Because in their mind, they're not like everyone else. They're special. They're royalty. They deserve better. And when they don't get it, they lash out like children. George Stephanopoulos showed the world how a true professional handles adversity. With grace, with composure, with integrity. He didn't need to yell or threaten or insult. He just stood firm in his principles and let Harry's behavior speak for itself. And boy, did it speak volumes. It told everyone everything they needed to know about who these two men really are. One is a professional who earned respect through his work. The other is someone who demands respect because of his birth. One has substance. The other has a title. And when push came to shove, substance won, integrity won, professionalism won, and entitlement lost. Spectacularly.